Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. Just got back from Crypto.com Arena, where the Lakers fell 132 to 119 to drop to 17-7. They are eliminated from the NBA Cup, and they are now number 4 in the West after being in number 2 for most of the last few weeks. A tough loss for the Lakers. There's really no other way to put it. I thought they started this game off well. I thought it was an impressive offensive start from an execution perspective. They were spamming pick and rolls. They were spamming mismatch hunting. They were trying to get LeBron in the post against De'Aaron Fox. They were trying to get two to the ball and then create either roll and dive opportunities for DeAndre Ayton or corner three opportunities for Rui. And it got off, they started off 15, up 15-9. And really from that point on, I think Stephon Castle gets an and one layup. There's a timeout, and then from that point on, San Antonio takes control of the game. They go up 39-30 at the end of the first quarter. They are up by 12 at halftime, 70-58. They are up 104-87 at the end of the third. The game was basically over at that point. The Lakers do make a valiant comeback attempt in the fourth quarter, but it was a little too little, too late, right? And they started the third quarter off lifeless. I thought based on the way that they closed the second quarter, based on them being down by nearly 20 points for stretches of that second, they get it to 12. We just saw them do this against Philadelphia. They were down only 7 when it felt like they should have been down more. Then they flipped the game early in the third. But this was the exact opposite. San Antonio comes out, hits a couple threes, and from that point on, it just snowballed, and they led by as many as 22 in the third. And the Lakers, again, kind of had a couple of second half nice stretches, runs, some small ball success, taking DeAndre Ayton and Jackson Hayes off the floor. But ultimately, it just was not enough. And frankly, I think the final score was not indicative of what was a thorough ass kicking. Another thorough ass kicking for the Lakers in terms of just every time they lose, it's by double digits, and it is rather convincingly. But before we get started, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out to the late night gang for still tuning in. Shout out to the chat. And shout out to Sophia. I don't know where the comment went. Spiritual Queen 2432 said that she knew I was about to go live, and she will be taking over from Jeremy for being the #1 fan of the channel. But shout out to everybody here. Let's get into the breakdown. So Lakers fall 132 to 119. Again, dropped to 17-7, number 4 in the West, and they are eliminated from the NBA Cup in the quarterfinals. No Vegas trip. Instead, they will be heading to Phoenix to play the Suns, who just blew them out, a week ago in LA. This game, though, will be in Phoenix on Sunday. The time is TBD. At least I have not yet seen it. But Buha's big picture off of tonight's game is LA's fatal flaw. And yes, I'm saying fatal, has become impossible to ignore. And it is speed kills. Speed kills the Lakers. The Lakers are at a physical disadvantage or frankly, a speed and athleticism disadvantage against most teams, if not all teams. Like, they might be just the slowest, most athletic or unathletic team in the league. I really, off the top of my head, don't know another. You go down the list, and even the lottery teams are at least like young and quick. That's not the Lakers. So they are at a physical disadvantage in most matchups. However, the Lakers' kryptonite this season, and we've seen it play out time and time again, and time after time in all of these losses that they've had, is a fast team with multiple scoring ball handlers who can put them in the blender defensively and either get to the rim and finish or get into the teeth of the defense and create kick out opportunities for shooters. So tonight that was De'Aaron Fox getting to the rim, getting to his midi, also creating driving kick opportunities for Harrison Barnes and Julian Champagnie. I'm mixing up the brothers here. Keldon Johnson had a huge first half with 13 points, and even some of the other guys, Devin Vassell, like just down the list. The Spurs have a bunch of shooters. They also have a bunch of speed, and they have a bunch of ball handling and guards who can attack you off the dribble. So the Lakers were constantly in the blender. At the same time, they are struggling, like watching Rui have to try to navigate screens with Devin Vassell was painful. Rui, that's just not what he's supposed to be doing out there. And teams continue to test him as an off-ball screen navigator. Austin trying to stay in front of De'Aaron Fox, or Austin trying to corral a Dylan Harper or Stephon Castle drive. Those guys are just too strong for him. They powered through him en route to fouls and layups. With Fox, he's just too quick and shifty and speedy for anyone on the Lakers team. Outside of Marcus Smart had some pretty good possessions against him, but for the most part, he was able to do whatever he wanted. So the Spurs checked, especially without Wemby, they just leaned into the guards entirely, and it was a totally different attack and game plan from San Antonio. And would have been interesting to see how they would have fared with Wemby. I mean, I feel like Wemby could have played the Luke Cornett role fairly well. He is a better defender and rim protector than Luke Cornett, and Luke Cornett is a special rim protector. Like, he's statistically up there for best in the league in the non-Wemby division. But Wemby obviously takes up a certain amount of usage and just changes the dynamic of the offense. But with San Antonio really leaning into the guard play, they just exposed the Lakers possession after possession. And there were so many facets. It was like getting downhill in pick and roll opportunities, sometimes just line drive, beating guys, coming off of pin downs, coming off of multiple off ball actions or some stack actions or just 3-man actions that they had designed to target. They were targeting Gabe a bit. They were targeting the centers a bit. They were targeting Austin and Rui and Luke. Like, they were targeting just about everybody for different stretches. But then it was in transition, and the Lakers actually didn't turn the ball over a ton. They only had 11 turnovers, but every turnover felt so momentous, where every turnover basically was a pick six, and Austin got stripped a couple times. One of them, LeBron ended up saving it with the block on Fox. One of his, LeBron had 2 or 3 blocks, 3 blocks tonight. So one of his, I think all 3 were on Fox, if I'm not mistaken, or at least 2 were, but LeBron saved it with a block. But Austin got picked a couple times. LeBron had a couple times he just like dribbled the ball into nothing and just gave up the ball. Luka had that one corner kick out that got stolen and created a transition opportunity. So every time the Lakers made a mistake, the Spurs killed them in transition and made them pay for it. The Spurs also did a good job with second chance points, just a good job in general getting out in transition. And the final 3-point margin only ended up being 1 made 3. One of those was in garbage time by Dalton, and several of those were the Lakers playing desperate and San Antonio just not guarding or respecting Marcus Smart. So I'm a believer of like, the stats are the stats, but sometimes not all numbers are created equal. And in the like relatively competitive portion of this game, the 3-point margin was much greater than the final box score indicates, in terms of the Spurs hit an avalanche of threes and a bunch of timely threes. Like, every time the Lakers would cobble together some sort of momentum, they get it to 12, they get it to 10, they get it to 8. The Spurs respond with a 3. The Spurs get to the free throw line. They get an offensive rebound, and they just made big play after big play. And the Lakers never got closer, within 8 after the Spurs pulled away early in the second quarter. So to bring it back to the big picture here, the Spurs are the exact type of team that gives the Lakers problems that we've seen up to this point in the season. I think it's a fatal flaw. Now, they did beat the Spurs earlier in the season, but it is worth noting they did not have Fox and they did not have Harper. And in this one, they didn't have Wemby, But you saw like that was almost a bigger issue for the Lakers in terms of the actual foot speed and keeping up and containing the ball. And that was something that JJ talked about after the game. He said right now the Lakers' biggest issue as a team, just team wide, is point of attack defense, containing the ball. And this is something we knew when we looked at the roster in the offseason, but it has been firmly on display, especially the last 8 games. The last 8 games, the Lakers have been a bottom 3 defense. And that is included, like they've been winning, right? I think the last 8, they're 5-3 overall, but they are like barely getting by in some games that they probably should be winning by more. And right now they cannot contain the ball at all. Marcus Smart came in and made an impact. And I think he is someone who needs a larger role moving forward. It's going to be a little tricky because right now he's coming off the bench, which puts a certain cap on his minutes. He's also dealing with the back situation, which also puts a cap on his minutes to a degree. But I thought JJ mentioning the point of attack defense right now is the biggest issue with the Lakers. I would agree. I think there are several other issues that are notable. Like I thought Stan Van Gundy on the broadcast, I rewatched parts of the game, and Stan Van Gundy, I thought, had a brilliant breakdown of the Lakers' issues right now. He said depth, defense, and shooting. And I completely agree. The bench was a no-show tonight outside of Marcus Smart for the most part. The shooting night to night vacillates. They have good shooting nights. They have average shooting nights. They have a lot of poor shooting nights. And then the defense has been bad for most of the season and absolutely horrific for the last going on 3 weeks now, or 2 to 3 weeks. Then JJ also mentioned that teams have weaknesses, right? Every team has some sort of weakness. Every team has some sort of flaw, some sort of thing that you can expose, some sort of shortcoming. The issue for the Lakers is that when they lose, it is like teams are spamming and hammering their weaknesses, and the Lakers' weaknesses really stand out, and they are losing in really alarming manners where, again, not to continue to hit on the net rating and point differential stuff, which I talk about all the time, but it's like most of the other top teams in terms of similar record to the Lakers don't have anywhere, they don't have anywhere as many or close to as many double-digit losses as the Lakers have. And I think that's been something that's been a bit concerning here, is every single loss this season has been by double figures. And I would say, depending on your definition of a blowout, 4 or 5 of them have been blowout losses. And that's just too many, I think, for a team that fancies itself as a contender. And I still think is a contender, but needs to make some real changes. And to me, I will continue to harp on the starting group. The starting group actually had a decent start tonight. They were +3. I mentioned that timeout early in the game. It was around the 7-minute mark. LeBron got pulled. So then that stint from the starting group, they were +3. But then I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. They went to them in the second quarter. They gave up a big run. They went to them to start the third, obviously, with just the coming out of halftime. They gave up another big run. So I would assume that tonight only pushed the starting group numbers even more negative. And this was a group that was already getting outscored by 13 points per 100 possessions up to this point. I would assume that it is around there or even worse after this game. So I think it's time to change the starting group. I thought it was time to change the starting group back in the offseason, but I continue to say, I think Rui's going to start, but I don't think this is the right move. And it just continues to be the Lakers are shooting themselves in the foot in one of the 2 quarters in terms of the first or the third. They either get off to a bad start and kind of make up for it in the third, or tonight was the inverse, where a okay start, decent start in the first with the starting group, and then a horrible rest of the game performance from that unit together. So it's still a relatively small sample size, but when we see them continually getting blown out and having these negative plus minuses together, I don't know how much more of a sample size we really need to see, where in theory the group cannot defend. In principle, they have not been able to defend. And I think they need to make a starting change. I also think that they probably need to make some bigger rotation changes. I think the Gabe minutes have been really rough lately, and Darius Soriano, shout out to Darius of the LFR pod, he put it succinctly. He summarized my perspective, and it's similar to a point I've made in one of the last couple streams talking about Gabe, but like Gabe has to be better defensively to warrant getting the amount of playing time that he is getting right now. And that's just not the case. He is not containing the ball. He is getting beat off the dribble repeatedly. And he's also not contributing. Like he has some level of gravity, and JJ talked about him pregame as like gravity and ball handling. And sure, he spaces the floor. Teams will respect his shot, and he does allow the Lakers to run certain actions with him as a ball handler. But he's not scoring consistently. He's not shooting consistently. He's not rebounding. And the defense, I think it's typically above average, but like it's still like you see how Marcus Smart comes in and impacts a game, and then you see how Gabe impacts a game, and it's just night and day. It's not even close. So, and one guy's making almost double the amount of money as the other guy. And I just think that that's a big hole in the roster right now. So I think I don't like JJ did make some changes tonight where he just leaned even more into the starting group plus Marcus. DeAndre had his minutes slashed a bit. He got yanked a couple times, with the last time being early in the fourth quarter. JJ did not like his defensive performance and just yanked him and decided to go centerless. But Gabe only played 14 minutes. Jackson only played 11 minutes, or just under 12. Jake only played 9 minutes. So that right there, outside of the top 6, everybody else played 14 or fewer minutes. And JJ really telegraphed that, like, I think it important, like the closest thing to a must-win game this season for the Lakers, right? Like this was actual stakes of it's win or go home. Win and go to Vegas, advance to the semifinals, get your rematch with OKC. Like JJ has kind of shown in some of these bigger games or higher stakes games that he does not fully trust the bench, and nor should he, to be quite frank right now. So I think I'd like to see a little bit more Adu. I'm not saying Adu is going to paper over all of the Lakers' issues, but he is a plus defender. He is a plus athlete. He tries hard on both sides of the ball. Whether he's cutting, whether he's crashing the offensive glass, whether he's getting getting out in transition or getting back in transition, I would like to see a little bit more Adu. And I just think that the Lakers have to start making some decisions more based on effort and performance rather than just standing in the hierarchy. Because I think I think right now that there is a little bit of a gap, or a large gap rather, between the really good teams in the NBA and the average teams, and then like the bad teams, right? And on any given night that the Lakers are playing an average team or a bad team, I think they should win or have a good chance to win against those teams. And they've often won against those teams. They're 11-1 against teams below 500. The issue is if they're playing a team of similar caliber or better, or even like slightly worse, I have way less confidence in this group right now. They're 6-6 against teams 500 or better this season. And I just, I think that they have to make, like, it's worked up to this point in the season, but I do think they have to think about some bigger changes here, because I don't think this team should be judged on beating Toronto and beating Philadelphia and beating Utah and Dallas and the Clippers. I think the standard needs to be beating OKC and beating Denver and beating Houston and maybe even beating San Antonio. I think this San Antonio team, they're legit, and they have been trending up all season, and they get Wemby back here. Like, this is going to be a really tough team, especially for the Lakers, based on their personnel and style of play. So to bring it full circle here, I think the Lakers need to change the starting group and mix up the rotation a bit. And I think there's been some rotation patterns that just aren't working up to this point. That's the first thing. As we know, the real thing here is going to have to be a larger change, which is going to come in the form of a trade. We are 5 days away from trade season starting. Probably, more so closer to like a month away from like the real start of the trade season, entering into the trade deadline. But I think it continues to be clear that the Lakers, as constructed, just don't have the defensive personnel or the speed or athleticism to really challenge the top teams in the NBA, or even again, like San Antonio, I would still put the Lakers ahead of them right now. But I mean, if they played them in a 7-game series, that's a dogfight. And if you told me San Antonio won or was the favorites, I would not be surprised by that. Like, I do not think it's a good matchup for the Lakers with their collective speed and ball handling and shooting. And JJ also mentioned, I have some notes here of what JJ said. He said that if teams shoot well against us, like, we don't really have a shot, and that's not something you want to hear from your head coach necessarily, but it's true. When the Lakers have a 3-point disparity of any notable size, they often, like, that's also been one of the trends in their losses. So I think the Lakers' flaw, or in my opinion, fatal flaw right now, has become impossible to ignore. It's very clear what their kryptonite is, and the unfortunate thing is this is the style of play that, like, a lot of the league is trending into in terms of speed, depth, pressing, having multiple ball handlers, driving kick, and just really attacking with a certain level of speed and ferocity that the Lakers just can't match up with. And that is something that they're going to have to figure out moving forward. In terms of notable performers, to pivot, I guess, to more positive numbers, 35, 5, and 8 from Luka. Did struggle with foul trouble, had 5 fouls, had a couple of tough ones go against him. 11 of 24 shooting overall, 3 for 8 on threes, 10 for 14 on free throws, and had a steal, 3 turnovers. So I think, Luka just kind of sleepwalks into his typical 35, 5, and 8. Obviously, the rebounding was a little bit lower than it's been lately, but I thought, like, they had a pretty solid game plan against Luka. They can, like, I think Castle is one of the better, and he's only in his second year, but to me, he's already ascended into one of the better Luka defenders. And, like, Luka's still going to put up his numbers, but it's not going to be easy. He did pick up some fouls against Luka, which ultimately shifted Champagnie onto him a bit more. And they were also switching a bit, and the Lakers were targeting different guys. But I thought Luka had a big first half. I think he had 21, if I'm not mistaken, in the first half. And then I think that was 31 going into the fourth. So not as strong of a second half from a pure offensive perspective, but they were blitzing him at times and mixing up coverages against him. And they also were able to, similar to Phoenix, they were able to try to make him more of a scorer in the middle of the floor and just say, we're going to live with Luke Cornett contesting and also keeping DeAndre Ayton in front of him, or at least not really creating that separate, like, the Lakers only had a couple lobs tonight. And I think that was indicative of San Antonio's defense. Then LeBron, 19 points, 15 rebounds, 8 assists. As aforementioned, had 3 blocks, also had 3 turnovers, 7 of 14 shooting, 0 for 3 on threes, 5 for 6 on free throws. And so the rebounding was really big for LeBron. The Lakers needed it. They, again, are not the best rebounding team. Like, they're a good rebounding team, but they can't struggle with giving up offensive rebounds. So typically someone else needs to step up on most nights besides DeAndre Ayton. And tonight that was LeBron. Most nights it's Luka. But I think this was a nice middle ground for LeBron in terms of, it was not the Philly game, but it was also not the Toronto game. He did get up 14 shots, which was 4th on the team. There was an outlier performance from Marcus off the bench with 16 shots, including 14 3-point attempts. But LeBron, like, I thought this was a solid performance. Might have been his second best performance overall, arguably. There were some lows. Like, he did miss some bunnies around the rim. A couple of the turnovers were unforced, and just, like, he has been a little bit loose with the ball, or it's been a little slippery in his hands for whatever reason, in terms of just, he will sometimes start to drive or kind of just be dribbling in an action and just lose the ball. And that's been a little bit of an adjustment for him, or sort of a change, which is where he's at in his career right now. But this, to me, was second or third best performance of the season for LeBron. Again, it's been 7-8 games, but I thought, especially defensively, like, the Lakers have a bad habit, and this was another thing JJ mentioned, of just not getting back in transition. And, like, just thinking about the Harrison Barnes dunk to end the first half. And like the Lakers have finally cut it to 8. LeBron has the dunk on Cornet. I have to mention that. Incredible moment from LeBron, like sensing the momentum and just the moment with the crowd. And a lot of times, like when you're trying to make a comeback, especially as the home team, getting the crowd behind you when the crowd's been a little bit lifeless because there's not been much to root for, that's a big thing. And that LeBron dunk on Cornet and him like seeing the lane and just being like, I'm going for the kill right now. That was a huge momentum play. Bench goes crazy. Bench is like on the court. Crowd's going wild. Then he follows that up with running back in transition and blocking De'Aaron Fox. So was LeBron's defense the best tonight? No. Were the rotations, were the ball containment the best? No. But he did have 3 blocks. I think all 3 were in transition in terms of stopping baskets where Spurs players had gotten downhill or gotten out in transition. So LeBron's effort tonight, I thought, was really impressive, and that is something that the rest of the group, I think, was galvanized by, but also can learn from and implement. And I think we saw LeBron spark a couple of the runs that the Lakers had throughout the game. Austin, rough night for him. I think this was not OKC Phoenix bad. This was probably similar to Philly. I think the Philly game might have been a little bit worse, but this was a bottom 4 game for Austin this season's 15 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists. I give him a little bit of a nod above those games because I felt like the 8 rebounds was tied for second most on the team. 7 assists was right there with Luka and LeBron. He had 5 assists really early in the game, and the shot, was a little bit passive early. Only took 1 shot, through the first few minutes of the game, but was diming people up and got LeBron a couple times, got Ayton a couple times. So I thought Austin was in a good playmaking groove, but he had a really tough assignment tonight, being the point of attack guy against De'Aaron Fox. And when Fox's jumper is falling like that, there's just not much you could do. But then, as I mentioned before, like Castle and Harper are both crafty ball handlers, attackers who are both stronger than Austin. And I thought you saw on drives, those guys create the separation that, there's just like, he's just physically limited against those guys. So I thought, 6 for 16 shooting for him, 2 for 6 on threes. He got sped up a bit, and that has been also a trend in some of LA's losses. When you think about the OKC loss or the Phoenix loss, only 3 turnovers for him. So I think prior to this, in 4 of the 5 losses that he had played in, he had 5 or more turnovers. So tonight did not have the 5 turnovers. And again, the Lakers took care of the ball relatively well, but he did get picked a couple times in the backcourt. And then again, defensively, I thought kind of a rough night for him. JJ noted after the game, for whatever it's worth, that he feels like Austin just doesn't have his legs right now, and that this upcoming stretch, Lakers have the rest of the week off till Sunday. Then they don't play again till Thursday. Like, they're going to basically play 1 game in the next 7 days. That will be nice for not just Austin, but the rest of the group. But certainly the jumper has not been there. The defense has I think been worse than normal, and he's had really nice games against Toronto and Boston, but now back-to-back games against Philly and San Antonio where he was a bit subpar. DeAndre Ayton, 11 points, 8 rebounds, and a steal. I thought he had a good start to the game. I thought his drop coverage, he was playing a little bit higher than he normally does, and I thought he was contesting, like, the Spurs were trying to attack in the middle of the floor. He was playing up. He was getting, being big, staying with his hands up and contesting. And I thought really, like, when the Lakers got off to that solid start to the game, a big part of it, I thought, was sort of funneling things and having DeAndre as the safety valve defensively. But that progressively went away. And I think with him in losses, sometimes we'll see, like, he can be a guy that if the group is really trying, DeAndre's really trying, if the group starts to take their foot off the gas and isn't as focused, he can struggle with that as well. So, I felt like the second half and really from the second quarter on was not as strong. And ultimately, JJ reduced his minutes and went away from him, despite Luke Cornett playing 33 minutes. Like you would theoretically want to match the minutes of their starting center with DeAndre, especially if it's this big, 7'3" monster in the middle. But the Lakers did not do that. They decided to go small. Rui, 8 points, 1 rebound, 1 assist. It was at 2 field goal attempts for a while until later in the fourth. Continues to shoot the ball well. As I have said many times, Rui is the bellwether of the offense in terms of Rui only getting 4 shots. That's not on Rui. That's on the Lakers offense. So I want to make that distinction very clear of if Rui is not getting looks, that is not a Rui problem because Rui is not really self-creating. Like occasionally he'll attack late in the shot clock, hit a pull-up midi, or maybe there's a mismatch. But the Lakers were not going to those types of actions. He was not getting those opportunities. And the fact that Rui only had 4 shots, I think, spoke to the health or the unhealthy nature of the Lakers offense tonight. I will note, I think he's the primary culprit right now, or in the conversation for being the primary culprit with some of the defensive lapses with the starting group. Continues to get lost off the ball, continues to make the wrong decision of when to help, when to rotate, and playing off of shooters. And just, I think he's in a lot of the Lakers, like the film breakdowns of the Lakers mistakes. He's often front and center and often the one making the most of them. So I continue to think like for the shooting is one thing, right? And it is so valuable for the Lakers offense. I don't want to overlook that. But the biggest issue right now is the defensive end, and that's the one spot that they could upgrade with Marcus Smart or I guess Jake LaRavia, but Jake LaRavia did not have a good game tonight either. Then looking at the bench, Marcus Smart, 26 points, 3 rebounds, an assist, had a block. I'm going to touch on him with one of my takeaways, so I don't want to go into that too much, but 8 threes for him, 9 of 16 shooting. Then the rest of the bench was forgetful. Like Jackson had a lob. He had some nice rim protection again. He continues to protect the rim well, but just 12 minutes for him. Gabe was just out there picking up fouls left and right, not getting blown by. And then Jake had a couple, like, I think sometimes it's interesting to see what triggers a JJ like meltdown or a JJ timeout and like yanking the guy. And Jake had one of those in the first half. I don't remember exactly what happened with him, but then in the fourth quarter, he passes up the open 3. He starts the drive. He gets cut off. Then he turns around and throws the pass to LeBron that gets picked off, and then creates an opportunity for San Antonio in transition. Like Jake has got to be more assertive and looking for his shot more. Another game of just one shot attempt. It was a 9-minute outing for him. So, in 9 minutes, maybe he could get up 2 or 3 shots, but he was someone who clearly like got on the outskirts of the rotation pretty early on in his first shift, and then didn't really play until early, like late third, early fourth. And really nothing else to say with the notable performers. In terms of stats of the night, I'm going to give you a few here. 48-31 in bench scoring. And again, that was partly influenced by Dalton hit a 3 late, and Marcus Smart had his best shooting performance in probably a couple of years. So if not for Marcus Smart going supernova and hitting everything, this is a very one-sided bench performance. And Dylan Harper came in, made an impact. Champagnie, I thought, was awesome on both sides of the ball. Keldon Johnson had 13 of his 17 in the first half. Like, their bench players came in and all made differences, and that could not be said for the Lakers. Also looking at fast break points, 27-21. That was a much bigger margin for most of the game until the Lakers made their little mini comeback attempt. Second chance points, 11-2, and points off turnovers, 16-11. I will go through the 3 takeaways now, but we'll try to keep them brief because I know I've gone a bit longer than normal up to this point. But takeaway number 1 is Marcus Smart's impact in his return. So look, Marcus Smart dropped 26 points. I don't know if he'll drop 26 in another game this season. The Spurs game plan was to not only play off of Marcus, but to put their centers on Marcus. They were putting Cornette and Olynyk on Marcus and just helping off of him and daring him to shoot. tonight, that was a bad bet from San Antonio. He went 9 for 16, including 8 for 14 on threes. Definitely, I mean, by far a season high in threes made, and that's going to, like, now he might be closer to league average. That's how small the sample sizes are in certain regards in terms of his 3-point shooting. But Marcus, like, only 2 primary Lakers players had a positive plus minus. It was Marcus and Rui. And Marcus, despite the bench got slaughtered, and Marcus was the only guy who had a positive plus minus. But it goes beyond that. Like, Marcus just does so many things. And I thought his on-ball defense against De'Aaron Fox, there was a couple times where he was being physical with Fox, and it was like a borderline foul, but they didn't call it. And you want to see that type of defense and, like, be testing the refs and what can you get away with. Marcus is constantly doing that. He was really frustrating Fox. Fox was chirping at the refs multiple times after shot attempts or possessions against Marcus. But, like, his defensive impact, he just comes in and wreaks havoc in the best possible way and is out there switching. He's commanding the defense. He's communicating and quarterbacking everything. And you just see the Lakers' sense of urgency when Marcus Smart is on the floor versus when he is off. It's a stark contrast. So tonight played 28 minutes, by far the most minutes he's played since LeBron returned. We're now going back to, like, the pre-LeBron phase in terms of his minutes. So it was nice to see him back. And the shooting will come and go. We know that we've seen plenty of off shooting nights from Marcus up to this point in the season. He was due for some regression to the mean in a positive sense, but I think, like, it just has never been clear that, especially in some of these games, like, I thought he had a great performance against San Antonio earlier in the season, but, like, all the lineup data points to LA is better on both sides of the ball with Marcus on versus off. He's a plus minus darling, and he is, in my opinion, LA's best rotation defender, both just, like, on the ball, but also just in general. And I think it's a challenge to keep this guy off the floor. Like, really the only thing right now is the health. But outside of that, I even live with some of the shooting stuff because of just how impactful his energy, his urgency, his focus, his communication, all that stuff is stuff that a lot of the rotation just lacks. And I'm just another really, really impressive Marcus performance tonight. And I think the Lakers lose by, like, 30 tonight if they don't. Like, if Marcus was not able to return tonight, I think this is like a 25 to 30 point loss. I think he made that big of an impact. Gave you a positive one. Now I'm going to give you a negative one. Takeaway number 2 is LA. Well, we'll say good ain't good enough. And what I mean by that is, coming off the win streak, LA only beat one team above 500 on their 7-game win streak. And we talked about it on here. We talked about it on Lakers Collective, that the Lakers had this stretch coming up of 6 straight games of above 500 competition. And the 6th game it was either going to be Phoenix or OKC. It'll now be Phoenix, but they're 2-3 over this stretch. One of them was a schedule loss. We have to acknowledge the Boston game and all that went into that. Their shot quality and shooting plus back-to-back, no Luka, no LeBron. Okay. But even then, that means if we just eliminate the Boston game, they're still 2-2. And I would argue, I know Toronto technically has been better than Phoenix up to this point in the season. I think they lost to the they lost to the 2 West teams for whatever that's worth. But in my opinion, they lost to the 2 best teams up to this point in the season. And it's funny to say that on a night when Phoenix just lost by 50 to OKC, and Phoenix didn't have Booker and whatever, but, like, they got blown out, in my opinion, by the 2 best teams that they played over this stretch. And outside of Boston, because I think Boston's better than Phoenix. But just point being, like, the Lakers have come back down to earth a bit against above 500 teams. And, like, that is just something to monitor moving forward. I don't want to expound on it anymore unless you guys want to ask me follow-up questions. But, like, I mean, you have to beat good teams in the playoffs, right? And the fact that they are now 500 against teams 500 or better and have a lot of blowout losses against that caliber of competition. I mean, all 6 of those losses are by double figures. It's a bit concerning. Like, they are killing the teams that are below 500, and they are beating even like the average to above average teams like a Philly. I think Toronto's punching a little bit above their weight right now. And maybe even Phoenix too, to be fair. But I just, it's something to note, especially when you look at the rest of the teams I think the Lakers should be comparing themselves to. I mean, OKC is no one should be compared to OKC right now, but they're 8-0 against teams 500 or better. Denver's 8-2, Houston 7-4. So, that's just, there's a gap there, in my opinion. And then takeaway number 3, before we get into the Q&A, is small ball success. So the Lakers go centerless over the final 10, almost 11 minutes of the game, or 10 something. And it's funny because I just talked about this. Someone asked me this, I believe on last night's stream, about what LA should do in situations where they need a stretch 5. And is that Maxi Kleba? Is that trading for a stretch 5? And the thing I said was, I would not be surprised if at some point here coming up, JJ starts to tinker or experiment with a centerless look. Like, you could maybe go with Maxi, but he's dealing with the back thing and he's kind of played his way out of the rotation. So I could see JJ experimenting with some sort of centerless look, and probably with the other, like the 5 best players outside of DeAndre. So tonight that was a group of LeBron, Luka, Rui, Austin, and Marcus. And that was the group that played primarily over that stretch. And they outscored San Antonio 26-20 until a couple of dagger shots from the Spurs. I mean, LA got that to what, I believe 10 was the closest. I think maybe 8 they got it to, if I'm not mistaken, at one point. They got it to 122, 114. Then Fox hit the 3. Then they got it. Yeah, then San Antonio, or Rui eventually got the layup, and then San Antonio scored 5 straight unanswered. So San Antonio iced it there with an 8-2 run to get it back to 14. And that was it. JJ pulled the plug after that. But I thought we saw something, like, we have seen LA have some success switching just 1 through 5. And in the Philly game in the second half, that was switching DeAndre and Jackson onto Maxi, onto Edgecombe, onto Paul George. Tonight in the fourth quarter, it was switching everything. And that goes back to last season when LA would play a lot of small ball, play DFS in the Marcus spot and switch everything. So like that's kind of, I guess, like JJ's attempt at sort of fixing some of this stuff. And they did have some success in the fourth quarter. Now there was an element of naturally San Antonio playing a little bit of prevent basketball. LA had a sense of urgency where I was wondering when JJ was going to pull the plug. He decided to ride it out. And again, it got interesting there with like 4 minutes left, but it's just something to note. And I'm excited to go through the film on what worked with that lineup. I think it's pretty much just like you have 5 guys who, even if Marcus isn't a laser or a spacer, he was out there making threes. You have Rui there, obviously, and you know they were kind of in that cat and mouse game of Cornette trying to play off of Smart, but then him burning them and then them adjusting a little bit, but then the Lakers trying to attack the paint. So just something to note for moving forward in terms of that could be a look we see. And I don't mind it in certain matchups. It worked tonight in its stint in the fourth quarter, but like I am a bit skeptical, especially against teams with more size that can work, like a Houston or a Denver. But with all that said, let's get into Q&A here. First one from Easy Peasy. Thank you for the super chat. Not playing the only elite defender on the team is frustrating. Adu should chance test, shoot anything above 30% from 3. He should be getting Gabe's minutes. Need the athleticism of both those guys. I assume you're saying Vando as the other guy. The only thing I'll quibble with here is I don't think Vando's been elite this season, and I think Marcus has been better than him. And a lot of the data backs that up. So I don't think I think you could make a case on last year's team that Vando was technically the best defender. I think Marcus is a better defender than Vando. But that's neither here nor there. That's a bit of semantics. In terms of Adu or Vando getting some time, I would lean Adu between the two because I think he's a bit more dynamic than Vando. I think he's more athletic. And I think in the stints we've seen, I think he's been a little bit more impactful than what we've seen from Vando recently. But to your larger point, either way, I think one of those guys should probably be back in the rotation. And yes, you're going to have some growing pains with the spacing. And we saw Vando checks in, Philly plays 10 feet off of him and says, shoot it. And he misses it. And like, that's just, you're going to have to live with that. Teams are treating Adu the same way. Teams are playing off of Adu. Boston was clearly like, we do not care about Adu. He cannot shoot. We're not going to guard him. So you're going to have to get over that. And I think that's a big thing for JJ because JJ likes shooting and spacing. But to your point, the Lakers need more athleticism. And I think it starts with a starting lineup change, a rotation change, and then ultimately making a trade. Morning Spring, thank you for the super chat. I really don't like Rui starting. I know there's a mental aspect for Rui, but at this point, I don't care. We need to start Smart or Adu over him for defense. I'm with you on Smart. The real limitation right now is the back and just his overall health and the wear and tear. I think in part he was able to play 28 minutes tonight because he was coming off missing over a week. And then the Lakers also only have one game over the next week. So he's got multiple days until Sunday and then multiple days after that until Thursday. So I think that was a part of why of course he played well. And I think that earned him some more time. He was shooting the ball well and was involved in some 3-man actions for LA. But look, you're preaching to the choir. You've come to the right spot. You've come to the right space here. This is something I've thought. I did not need to see a minute of Lakers basketball to come to this conclusion. And however many minutes the Lakers have played up to this point in the season has only confirmed what I think should have been obvious going into the season. But you live and you learn, hopefully. And I think the Lakers should be learning, but unfortunately, I do not foresee a starting lineup change of consequence, or I guess a starting lineup change, because I think any change to the starting group would be of consequence, but I don't see it happening. I could see Smart maybe playing more. And like tonight, remember, I believe in 2 of the 3, if not all 3 games, it might've just been 2 of the 3 games that Smart had played post LeBron's return, Gabe had played more than him. So this was a marked change in terms of Marcus doubled up Gabe tonight. He played 28 minutes. Gabe played 14. That's how it should be every single night. Like I don't know why Gabe has had the leash that he has had up to this point in the season in terms of the ability to like make mistakes and also not really contribute and still get playing time. So I think Adu is not going to start. I think Gabe would start over Adu. I think Jake would start over Adu. Like I think he's in the pecking order. He's multiple players behind in terms of like the next 5th starter, but he should probably be playing. And I think Marcus should be starting. Ricky Burt, thank you for the super chat. Reeves cannot handle Smart athleticism in the playoffs. Look, I think the jury is going to be out on Austin until we see it in the playoffs, right? Like I've talked about it before. Anytime he has a subpar performance against an athletic team, I get it. Like people are going to come for his head, and it is what it is. I think there's also been a bit of an awkward adjustment period with LeBron, and it does feel like it's more so a rhythm thing, but it does feel like when the Lakers have had all 3 players, one of the guys kind of gets squeezed, and one of the guys, and it's not Luka. So let me be clear. One of the Austin or LeBron gets squeezed, and early it was LeBron. More recently, it started to be Austin, and it's something that the Lakers are going to have to figure out. And again, it's not even necessarily a role thing because Austin actually took more shots than LeBron tonight. But I mean, technically, I guess if you factor in the free throws, maybe LeBron's usage was a little bit higher than Austin's, but it was pretty close. And So it's not even like that. It's not like Austin took like 6 shots and was like a distant 4th or 5th in the pecking order or something like that. Austin was still 2nd in the team in shots. I just don't think he ever quite found a rhythm. And we've seen it where all 3, I believe it was the Clippers game where all 3 erupted. That's the game they had like almost 100 points together. Outside of that, it's more so been Luka gets his, and then one of the 2 has a good offensive performance, and then the other one maybe has a good playmaking performance, but doesn't quite get a rhythm. And I think that's something LA is going to have to figure out. But to your point, like, I mean, that's the final boss for Austin. I think if this were a video game, Austin, however many levels there are, Austin has passed all the levels, and I think passed a lot of the levels with flying colors. The final level is the athletic boss of, really, I think this is more of an OKC conversation. I think the Lakers can beat, even if Austin is not at his best, I think they can beat just about anybody on a given night or in a 7-game series. This is more of an OKC specific situation of if LA plays them in the second round or conference finals, how does Austin hold up in that particular matchup? And I like agree that there are real questions with that. I don't want to write it off entirely because I thought like Toronto is a quick athletic team. They have some really good defensive players, and he was more than, he carried the Lakers in that game. His performances against Minnesota in both games were great. The Portland game, outside of the turnovers, which part of it was he was like literally the only guy who could dribble the ball, and it was the second night of a back-to-back, still dropped 41 on them. So my slight pushback would be I think he's fared better than he did last season in general against this type of opponent. But certainly you look at the OKC game, you look at the Phoenix game, you look at tonight, you look at the Philly game. Those are 4 of, and one of those was a win, but those are 4 of the more athletic, speedy. Like, I think part of the problem, to be completely candid here, is like, I think that they're putting way too much on Austin defensively. And I think asking Austin to guard a De'Aaron Fox or a Tyrese Maxey or a Shea or a Devin Booker, and then also be like the co-primary option or the number 2 option, whatever, that's just a lot. And I don't know. I think the ideal deployment of Austin defensively is as a secondary defender, not as a primary guy. And the unfortunate thing is for the Lakers is they don't have someone to take those assignments outside of Austin. This is where Marcus Smart to me makes a ton of sense, where you swap out Rui, start Marcus. He can guard Shea and Booker and Maxey and Fox. And that, those are primarily 1s and 2s. But even if you're playing Boston, you could put him on Jaylen Brown and probably have Austin on like Derek White, right? Like he can guard 1 through 4, in my opinion. Like there are some 4s who are probably too big for him, but 1 through 3 at a minimum, 1 through 4 to a degree. And that's like the thing I continue to harp on of having the Marcus Smart or maybe longer term, the Herb Jones. That's the player that like you put, and of course the Lakers are going to switch and teams are going to target, and like, you're going to have to navigate that. That's its own thing where like, I think the Lakers got to be more selective with that. And there are teams that switch that still selectively switch and fight around screens. The Lakers have not been that type of team. They've been a soft switching team, and they let teams dictate the matchups. But at least in terms of like the bulk of the possession, the primary starting point, I like Marcus Smart on Tyrese Maxey. I like Marcus Smart on Shea. I like Marcus Smart on De'Aaron Fox and Stephon Castle way more than I like Austin on those guys. And I think sliding Austin off of the ball defensively will help his legs, will help his overall just like conditioning, shape, whatever, and also give him more juice on the offensive end. Because I think part of it tonight was also he didn't have quite the same juice in terms of touching the paint, getting downhill, etc. Trucker Star 7, thank you for the super chat. Seems like Rich was right. This is not a contender. look, if you want to come to that conclusion, I'm not going to disagree with you. I think that for me, the Lakers have shown that I think they are one move away from being a true contender. I think they are in the contention conversation. And to me, you could probably argue them somewhere between the 4th best team and the 7th best team in the NBA. I think there's a clear top 3 with OKC, Denver, and Houston for me in that order. And then I think there's everybody else. I think the Lakers are in that mix with New York and Detroit and Minnesota and San Antonio. I think they're toward the top of that list, but if you want to argue they're toward the bottom, and if you want to argue, hey, 6, 7, or 8 means that they're not a real contender, then that's okay. Like, there might just be 3 contenders right now, and it's whichever one of those top 3 teams survives that gauntlet and comes out of the conference. But they certainly have work to do, and I don't think that should not be news to anybody. I think looking at the roster in the offseason, it was clear they didn't have enough defense. If anything, like, I felt like I was kind of low on their defense compared to consensus. I might have been even too high on their defense compared to what their defense actually is. When looking at, like, I mean, I think they have maintained 21st in defense right now. They dropped to 7th in offense, but I mean, their defense is getting shredded on a nightly basis, and some of it's due to injury, some of it's due to schedule, some of it's due to opponent, some of it's due to, I think, the cumulative workload of Austin and Luka are 2nd and 3rd in the NBA in minutes. I've been clamoring for those guys to play fewer minutes. I think they have too much of a workload right now when you factor in the usage and the minutes. But this is also where, like, if the Lakers take care of business in games and don't have so many close games, guys play fewer minutes. Look at Shea resting every 4th quarter. But if you want to come to that conclusion, I'm not going to disagree with you. I think there's a bit of semantics. Like, for me, they're probably the 4th or 5th best team in the NBA, or 4th or 5th best odds at winning the title. But, I think yesterday I said like maybe 5% chance, which to me is a puncher's chance. But that's with like OKC probably being at like 55% right now, and Denver maybe being at like 20%, and then Houston's at like 10 to 15%. So there is for me, a bit of a gap between the Lakers and like the top 3 teams. But so if you think that gap's too big, which if you come to that conclusion, I don't necessarily disagree. But I do think they have a shot. And if they can make the right trade, to me, that vaults them much more in that conversation. Ali. I was reading Alil here, but Ali, thank you for Super Chat. 2 games in 8 days, got to lock in during practice. 100% agree. I think this is opportunity to, like, the Lakers are going to take tomorrow off, but Friday when they reconvene at practice, Friday and Saturday need to be all about handling ball pressure, handling a press, handling being pressured within the half court and trapped, and also the way that Phoenix and San Antonio were able to just keep the pick and roll 2-man game to just 4 guys in terms of being a 2-on-2 and having the Luke Cornett, Mark Williams rim protection, and also breaking up the lobs. So I think LA, this is an opportunity for them to scout an opponent that just beat them and beat them handedly. And also an opponent, like, one thing we can't overlook here is Phoenix just lost by 50. Phoenix just got embarrassed on national TV by OKC in a demoralizing fashion. And you cannot overlook the like mental response to that in terms of, like, they're going to be at home and they just lost by 50. That to me is like a scrappy, feisty, testy group that is not going to like that taste in their mouth, that they're going to want a palate cleanser, and the Lakers are up next. So the Lakers are going to have to, I think, be prepared and have some counters and really study the film from the Phoenix loss, but also practice it, to your point, in the 2 days leading into the game. And then next week, you're going to have a different test with Utah where, it's lesser competition, but that's also a team that's young, athletic, shoots a lot of threes. Not quite sure like who's going to be available. They always have guys in and out, but yeah, I mean, I totally agree. The Lakers should have at least 4 practices over the next 8 days. And those are really like, you rarely get this stretch. This is going to be the final stretch they have like this until the All-Star break, if memory serves. So they got to take advantage of it. Nala, thank you for the super chat. Drop coverage is stalling the offense, significantly lowering our production from role players. Austin struggles in it because his size finally went small and it helped offensively. Need to figure it out. Yeah, so to this point, teams that have been able to drop and sort of corral Luka and Austin in the pick and roll, and looking specifically at Phoenix and San Antonio tonight, it takes a certain level of basketball IQ defensively. It takes a certain level of speed and screen navigation. And I think basically what it becomes is like, with the way that the floor is spaced, it almost becomes, you have the defender sandwiched behind Luka, funneling Luka or Austin into this behemoth rim protector. And there's like, Luka can hit the midi, and he hit several of them tonight. He can also draw fouls out of that action, right? Like, but it does promote that player trying to be more of a one-on-one or even one-on-two scorer. And it sort of takes away the lob and the pocket pass. And you have to have certain personnel. You have to have a certain caliber of drop defender, certain caliber of rim protector, which Mark Williams and Luke Cornett are statistically. Then you also have to have a certain point of attack defender who can not die on the screen, recover around it, and then also pressure without fouling. And both those teams have those types of guys. And then the other thing would be when Austin or Luka, more so against Phoenix, because that was a higher turnover game, would then try to do dump off passes or kick out passes. The other off-ball defenders are rotating and sort of wreaking havoc off the ball, and you think a passing lane is there, then that's when they intercept it. So it's a real challenge for LA. JJ talked about that after the game as being one of the more challenging defensive coverages that they face this season, and it's something that they're going to have to figure out, to your point. But yeah, it's been an issue, especially against the faster teams. Rich, thank you for the super chat. I was super disappointed in JJ's rotation. Rui needs to be the 6th man off the bench. Not enough touches for him, and that takes him out the whole game. Yeah, you're again preaching to the choir here. No qualms from me about that. I think it's obvious. I think it's been obvious. We'll see if JJ makes that counter. Now that LA, they're not on a losing streak, but they have lost 3 of 5. Maybe that lends itself to a greater change. I just think the issue right now is Marcus has missed 4 of the 5 games. Had Marcus been healthier during the stretch, maybe that leads to JJ starting him. But I think based on Marcus's physical limitations right now, he's in a tough spot with that. Colby, thank you for the super chat. The word is out on how to beat us, and we can't stop it. Our flaws are exposed, and we can never put up any resilience when teams start to attack our weaknesses. We need to do better, but I don't know if we can. I mean, you succinctly summarized my big picture in terms of LA's fatal flaw has become impossible to ignore. Now, I think one distinction here that is worth making is not every team can play this style of basketball. Not every team that's why I tried to lay it out. You need multiple ball handlers who are capable scorers and passers, right? So a lot of teams have one or the other. They have guys who could score but can't pass. They have guys who could pass but can't score. So you need a certain level of offensive firepower. You need a certain level of shooting around that offensive firepower. And then you also need a certain element of speed and athleticism. So speed and athleticism, yes, most teams are going to beat the Lakers in that regard. Shooting, also, yes, most teams are going to beat the Lakers in that regard. Having the multiple ball, I think we saw the Philly game to me is a perfect example of VJ Edgecombe kind of had a quiet night. And Tyrese Maxey, like the Lakers, I thought did a pretty good job against him in the second half. But they, to me, were like a ball handler or two short of, if it wasn't Maxey creating offensively or Embiid grifting to get to the free throw line, like they did not have a stable offensive action or look against the Lakers defense. Kind of similar to Toronto, where it was very Ingram heavy. And once you kind of slowed down Ingram, they just didn't have a lot to go to. So that to me is the distinction with a team like San Antonio, a team. I mean, Phoenix is a little bit more in that like lane. It's a lot of Booker and Brooks, but Gillespie has obviously had an incredible season. Royce O'Neal has become this point forward for them. So they also have different guys who can attack, maybe not at like the level you would anticipate, but they're kind of funky and unconventional. But I think the distinction here with San Antonio is you got Fox, you got Harper, you got Castle, you got, Vassell has been running. He's more of a 3 now with how they use him, or like a 2-3, but he's been a combo guard before. He's gotten his on-ball reps, going back a couple years in the doldrums of the San Antonio era, when Wemby was first out and even before Wemby. So they have multiple guys who can attack you, who can get out in transition, who can attack a closeout. And they just have a lot of smart players like Harrison Barnes. Is a champion and has been in high level games and has been in finals and conference finals. Luke Cornett is another guy who has obviously won a championship and been to conference finals. Wemby is Wemby, right? And so like that's just a smart professional basketball team who knows what they want to do. And so to bring it back to what you're saying, I think the word is out. The word is out on the Lakers and how to attack them. I don't think Utah, for example, can attack the Lakers in the same way. I don't think New Orleans I think you have to have a certain baseline level of talent and skill and ability, and then also check some of these boxes. But the teams that do, I think as of right now, especially with how LA is playing the rotation, this is where, again, I get back to the starters, the bench rotation. If LA continues with the status quo here, they're going to continue to lose in the same way. I don't think, like, there's a lot of talk after the game from the players of, well, we got to get all 5 guys on a string. We got to be more connected defensively. And that's true to an extent. But this group is just, if they're doing that, they're like average. And even average is not good enough for this team to win a championship defensively. So I just don't think they have the personnel. And that doesn't mean they shouldn't try to like construct lineups that make sense. And that's where, again, I think they need to make some changes. Mac Roblox on 4, thank you for the super chat. After watching this game, does this show the Lakers should have started Marcus Smart? Again, I mean, that is the topic of the game. Yes. Now, tonight, again, I want to be fair to JJ, and I want to be fair to the situation in terms of Marcus has been injured. He's been dealing with a back injury. So this was the fear partly with starting. Like, this was part of the argument against starting Marcus was he played 54 games the last couple years. He's over 30. He does have an extensive injury history, and you probably got to keep him in bubble wrap to a degree to get to the playoffs. But when he's healthy and available, you just see the impact, and it's hard to see the starting group be lifeless and then see Marcus come in and make that type of impact and just wonder, what would this look like if he was out there? And look, I'm even like, politics aside, and politics are a big part of this. I would love to just see, like, try it for 5 games. Just try it for 5 games. Try it for Sunday against Phoenix. Then you got the Thursday against Utah, and then you got a few games leading into Christmas, and maybe just leading into the Christmas game. And if it doesn't work, if the lineup data isn't good, if you're losing, if the starting lineup is still kind of meh, go back to Rui. But maintaining the status quo when the status quo is subpar and you're losing the starting minutes, I just think that that's a mistake. And I think they're bashing their heads into a wall unnecessarily. So, I think the season shows that they should have started Marcus Smart, but this game is another sign that, for that argument. Easy peasy. Okay, I'm going to hold the trades questions until the end. I see the next 3 are trade questions. So I will get to that in a second. Mr. Laker 19 says, thank you for super chat. You still are clutch owned. To not even mention how bad LeBron is on defense shows you have no integrity or objectivity. I did criticize LeBron's defense earlier. I mentioned his rotations. I mentioned him closing out to shooters. I also criticized Rich's podcast appearance or podcast segment on his show a couple days ago. So I also criticized LeBron after the Toronto game, not for making obviously the game winning pass, but for going 4 for 17 and being blocked multiple times, and wasn't maybe like a criticism directed at him in terms of like in him intentionally being like that, but it was more so just like, this does not look good with LeBron up to this point in terms of his defense and in terms of his ability to get downhill, finish, create separation, etc. Obviously, he bounced back with the Philly game, but I have been mentioning LeBron's defense. I don't know if you're tuning into all my shows or if you're selectively listening, but I would strongly disagree here and also say that I have been critical of LeBron and or Clutch at various points. So I respectfully disagree with you. RGN Cal, thank you for the super chat. Rob sat there after the playoffs, talked about what we needed and did none of it. Why talk about it and do nothing? Schedule gets super easy soon. I think he did some of it. I think they handled the center situation with Ayton, and he's largely been, I think, exceeding expectations. Laravia and Smart have helped. Laravia, you'd like to see more offensively. Smart, you'd like to see him to be healthy. But like those guys have, like, the roster is better and deeper than last year. But the biggest thing was a two-way wing that they did not address, and a two-way starting wing. And that's where I think some criticism is warranted. Keon Park asks, do you think Rui is starting to is to sell high on him? I don't think so. I think Rui starting is JJ prefer, like, again, we've seen this countless times when there is a lineup decision to make. JJ prefers spacing and shooting and offense to anything else. 2, Rui cares about starting. Rui has cared about starting, and there is a political element here of LA trying to appease him. You could also look at the splits. He has been less effective as a bench player compared to being a starter, but I think there's a component of trying to keep him bought in and trying not to isolate him or get like a lesser version of Rui off of the bench. And then I also think there's a part of it with the Marcus Smart injury situation and just some of the concern with that and not knowing if you could trust him consistent. Like, Rui's been healthy, right? Like, I think, I don't think Rui's missed a game this season, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe he missed one that I'm forgetting, but I'm pretty sure Rui's either missed no games or 1 game. And the same cannot be said for Marcus Smart. So now, to your point, does it help his trade value if he's perceived as a starter? Sure. And he is shooting the ball well. He is putting up some numbers, at least offensively, to like having offensive value. But I also think to a degree, like, starting him really exposes his flaws and his limitations as a defender and as a rebounder. And you're not really like doing him justice in that regard. But I think the biggest thing is like JJ's preferences. JJ loves Rui, Luka loves Rui, LeBron loves Rui. And I also think that there's just a component of him not wanting to come off the bench. Nala says, we don't give ourselves a chance when we play stretches of extremely lazy ball. I hate when OKC plays before us. It makes it stand out so much more. To your point here, that was another thing that kind of frustrated me from this game was we saw a couple stretches of desperation from LA once the game was getting out of hand. Like that stretch to close the second quarter, a little bit of closing the third quarter, and then like middle of the fourth quarter, we saw some real desperation and urgency from LA. And it's just like, why can this group not conjure that more consistently? And that continues to be something I harp on, because I do believe that you are the sum of your habits. And LA, more often than not, either like has a subpar defensive first half, or has like a subpar 3 out of 4 quarters defensively, and then tries and shows like this defensive ceiling and floor that is higher than we think for stretches of a quarter or in crunch time or whatever. Like they've been the league's best crunch time defense. It's like 24 minutes or whatever, but still that's something. But like it's equally impressive as it is frustrating, because then you're like, why can't you do this more consistently? And they just have this laissez-faire attitude and approach to games, or laissez-faire, where, it's just like, why can't you just do this? So that's when I harp on some of the close games that they have, it's like, I want to see them put the foot on the neck and have the Milwaukee game, more consistently. And it does not have to be every night. These guys are human. Second night of a back-to-back, sure, you might have a stinker or you might have a close game, but they struggle a lot of times to have separation from teams. And a big part of it is because of the defense. And some of it's just like personnel, some of it's limitations. They are not quick. They cannot contain the ball. But then you see the stretches where they do it for 4 or 5 minutes, and you're like, why can't you do that for 10 minutes? Why can't you do that for 20 minutes? And that could have a big impact in a game. So totally with you, especially seeing it compared to OKC. Sometimes it looks like they're playing a completely different sport compared to the Lakers. In defense of the genre, says, you didn't criticize, thank you for super chat. You didn't criticize Adele's music. That's a step too far. I will never criticize Adele. Jackson, thank you for the super chat. Feels like LBJ can't beat dudes off the dribble. I agree. I think we saw some of that in the Philly game, but for the most part, that has not been a part of LeBron's game that has returned. I think he's been pretty jump shot reliant, and that's okay to a degree because he is such a good jump shooter and has become a really good shooter in the mid-range. He's a really good 3-point shooter. Like tonight didn't have a good 3-point shooting night, but last couple of years, 40+% on catch and shoot, and been in that high 30s, 40% range. And he's been in that range for a few years now. But I think that the two final steps for LeBron in terms of being back to last year's LeBron for me are going to be consistently beating guys off the dribble and having that explosion in athleticism like more consistently, and then also the defensive side and him showing an ability to contain the ball, make faster rotations. Like tonight, some highlights for sure, getting back in transition with the blocks. He's still the chase down block master, but in general, he's been a net negative on defense, and I think the Lakers need a bit more from him. Like he's certainly not helped the starting group's problems. So I think those are the two areas that LeBron needs to improve on. And then this last super chat here from Jackson, and then I will get into the trade questions, and then I will take a few more and then wrap. Jackson asks, how do we match up with Houston in your opinion? Houston's an interesting one because if we look at the ways that teams test the Lakers, they check the speed and athleticism box, and they check the defensive box of like being able to pressure, wreak some havoc. What they don't really check is they don't check the shooting box. Like they were the best 3-point shooting team in the league for a bit. I think they're still in the top 10. I don't fully buy that. Maybe look, they're second in the league in 3-point shooting in terms of percentage. In terms of volume, they are last in 3-point attempts. And in terms of makes, they are 24th. So very low volume 3-point shooting team, high percentage team because they're selective with their shooting. But I think you need both against the Lakers. So Houston, sure, they can outshoot the Lakers in some games probably, but for the most part, I don't think they have a substantial advantage over the Lakers in that regard. So the shooting is a little wonky there. And then they don't really have the multiple ball handlers. Şengün, KD, Amen Thompson, they do it a little bit differently, right? They run a lot of two-man game with Şengün and KD. KD can rise up against anybody, especially against the guys the Lakers will probably be putting on him. And then Şengün is leveled up into being like a second team All-NBA level guy who's knocking on that like top 10, top 12 conversation in terms of his standing in the league. So those guys do it a little bit differently. And then Amen Thompson, obviously, I think has improved as a ball handler, but they're sometimes using him as a point guard when he's not really a point guard. So I think they don't check all the boxes to give the Lakers problems. However, what they do check is they're the best offensive rebounding team of all time. Steven Adams is going to feast against the Lakers, and I think they're going to mash the Lakers and present a physical problem in terms of the strength, the toughness, and just the physicality that I don't think the Lakers bring on consistently every night. So I think their path to beating the Lakers is a little bit different than, say, OKC or San Antonio, or even I think Golden State is a bit of a tough matchup for the Lakers when they're right. And that's purely due to speed and offense and driving kick and beating you off the dribble. Houston's not that type of offense. They're like, we're going to mash you, and then we're going to play this weird zone, and you're going to just see nothing but arms and limbs, and good luck getting through our trees. So it's a bit of a different style. I think up to this point in the season, Houston has been unequivocally better than LA. I mean, technically they now have a better record, but you look at offensive rating and defensive rating, they are better than LA on both sides of the ball. They have a better net rating than LA. They do not have anywhere close to as many alarming losses as LA. So I think Houston's better. I would pick Houston currently to beat LA, but I think that to me is probably the team that is LA's the closest to in terms of like, if you wanted to say LA beats Houston or can beat Houston, I'm not going to disagree. And like, that could be more of a conversation. Houston is less proven than OKC and Denver have championship cores. OKC might be the greatest team of all time or in that conversation. Denver just won a title a couple years ago. They've been on multiple deep playoff runs. So I think those teams are like, they have an experience level that Houston doesn't quite have. Of course, KD has it, but like the rest of the group does not have it and doesn't have it together. So I think the Lakers, I think they can outscore, like they can outscore Houston. I just worry about the transition, the rebound, like the margins. Again, that's something JJ mentioned tonight, that the Lakers don't win the margins. Houston dominates the margins, and that's something I'm a little nervous about. I also don't love their matchups for Şengün. LeBron's defended Şengün well. I think Rui can maybe defend him okay, but I do think Şengün's at a different, like he's just at a different phase of his career than he was even last year. And then KD, I don't really love the matchups there. All right, now we're getting into the trade part, so I will go back up to the people that asked the trade questions. Then I see we just got one. So first one from Easy Peasy. Thank you for the super chat. Would you give up Reeves if it led to Trey and Herb? That's tough. I do think, I thought Reeves and Trey was closer last year than it is this year. I think there is a notable gap. I do really like the concept of Trey and Herb next to Luka. And now I think you do need, to JJ's point, and he actually made this in reference to Gabe Vincent, not to Austin Reeves, but JJ's point was you need 2 to 3 ball handlers on the floor at any given time. And of course, LA has LeBron right now, but like longer term, if we're looking at next year or a couple years from now, whenever LeBron is no longer a Laker, if we're talking about Luka, Herb, Trey, power forward center, or even like big 3-and-D wing and a center, I do worry a little bit about the shot creation and ball handling and playmaking outside of Luka. Like, of course, Luka is going to bring it at a incredibly high level, but I do think Luka has played well against or next to a Brunson type, a Kyrie type, a Reeves type. So I think you'd have to find a way, and maybe that ends up being like a guy that comes to mind that I think would fit really well in that type of lineup construction would be like a Jalen Johnson, right? And that being like the second star, maybe Trey Murphy's the third guy, Herb Jones is the 3-and-D guy, and then you have a center, whether that's Ayton or someone else. That is a very interesting roster construction to me. Now, how you land a Jalen Johnson or that type, and I mentioned him specifically because that's a big ball handling forward who has really grown as a passer. And like Trey to me is much more of he's gotten better as a ball handler and playmaker, but he's much more of a scorer and a shooter than a ball handler playmaker. So if you're building out lineups where Trey's your second guy in terms of those specific things, I don't think you have the requisite level of ball handling and playmaking, even with Luka out there. So I think that's a bit of a challenge. So I say all this to say, depends ultimately what the trade looks like. I would have to think about it. I think Trey could be an all-star at some point or like in that all-star conversation. I don't think he's ever going to be as good as Austin is right now, to be completely frank. Now he doesn't come with the same defensive concerns. I think he's gotten a little bit better defensively this year. Herb's obviously, it's the inverse. It's the offensive end for him, the shooting, though he's shooting the ball well. I'd have to think about it. I think I probably lean yes, because I think you're adding like whatever gap there is between Austin and Trey, and I do think there's a notable gap. I think Herb Jones slides into that gap and makes it much more of an even conversation. But I think my fear here would be if, just for example, you're looking at like longer term DeAndre, Rui, Trey, Herb, and Luka, there's not enough passing and ball handling in that lineup. So I think it changes the way you have to build your lineup around Luka. And you could still have like a 6-man type, of course, but when it's like money time, I just think if it's a perimeter group, like it worked in Dallas because you had Kyrie out there as well. It worked in Dallas because you had Jalen Brunson out there. It's working in LA right now because you have Austin and LeBron, but Austin for most of the season. So that's where I think, like, especially where I think the biggest gaps are between Trey and Reeves, it's the ball handling and the passing. And that's where I think then that creates a different hole in your team. Like he can probably make up, he's a better shooter than Austin, and he could probably make up 85% of the scoring, and then you get an improvement defensively. But that like the ball handling and playmaking has been a real weapon for LA and a big part of why they've been so successful. Next one from Mac Roblox 94. Thank you for the super chat. Would trading Dalton Connect for Keon Ellis help with the depth and athleticism? 100%. I think this is a no-brainer that I know this has been a popular one with the fan base. I do this in a second. I throw in a second. I'd even throw in probably a swap because I don't think the Lakers swaps are even that valuable to begin with, and they're probably not going to be swapping with Sacramento anyway. It's kind of one of those things where you could sell it to your fans if you're Sacramento. Hey, we got to swap, but like it's probably not going to materialize. But yeah, I mean, Keon Ellis, I think tonight would have been the Lakers' second best bench player. So I think. He's a clear upgrade over Gabe, in my opinion. Next one from BT Kingsley. Thank you for the super chat. Gabe and Dalton and a first for CP3 and D Jones. D Jones is the prize. I like it in theory. I think a couple things here. So Derek Jones is coming off the injury, and you want to see him be healthy and have a certain. I'd like to see him return for a few weeks and play at a certain level before considering that. The other issue is I think LA's standard for trading the first is going to be pretty high. And I think it's probably a Herb Jones type where it is a player in their mid 20, like, maybe late 20s at the earliest, but ideally mid to early 20s who can grow with Luka and Austin longer term. So even a guy like Andrew Wiggins or Dylan Brooks, I'm not sure that they would give a first round pick for right now. And I don't even think those guys are available right now. But like, even if they were, I think the first round pick would be still a bit of an issue for LA. So I think the Lakers say no to this, if only because I think for them, the first would be too much to give up. Now, if there's a way to do this with the second and maybe multiple swaps or a couple swaps, I think they would consider that. But I think that like, maybe you could flip a swap or a couple swaps for a protected first or that depends on, maybe not, like, it's probably wishful thinking, but yeah, I think they're just in a tough spot with the draft capital where ideally for Derek Jones, you're probably giving up like 3 seconds, like similar to what you gave up for DFS last year, but they just don't have 3 seconds to trade. And you also have to factor in it's the Clippers. Do they want to help out the Lakers? So I like see where you're coming from. And I think it's an interesting trade in theory. I just don't think the Lakers would give up a first for a more like temporary starter over the next couple of years instead of like a longer term piece. Then next one from Mo Cartier. Thank you for the super chat. Thoughts on Rui Connect first and swap for Herb and Sadiq? Feels like it solves 3 issues: bench, defense, and rebounding. I love this trade. I love this trade. And you might not, I mean, you probably have to give up Rui. I would love a version of this where you don't give up Rui. If there was a way to just move Rui to the bench and add Herb and Sadiq, that's like, to me, basically as close to a home run, a realistic home run for the Lakers this season. But yeah, I love any version of a New Orleans trade where you can get Herb and Sadiq. I think I would give up the first for Herb. I think the Lakers would give up the first for Herb. And if you could find a way to add in Sadiq and make the money work, yeah. And to your point, especially if you can't keep Rui, but even if you can't, I think Sadiq can do some Rui-esque things. He's not quite the shooter, but he does have some of that like mismatch hunting, scoring ability as a bigger forward. And I think it helps even out the bench group. And then I guess in this scenario, your bench would be, you start Herb, your bench is Marcus, Jake, Sadiq, Gabe, and Jackson. And, I as long as it's kind of slotted in that order, I like it. But going 5 more minutes here. So let me know if you guys have any more questions. To be clear here, the Lakers are only giving up 1 first because they only have a 1 first to trade. They do have multiple pick swaps, but they can only trade 1 first. So I see someone had commented two firsts. People are noting, so Herb's shooting has tailed off from earlier in the season, but Herb is still shooting. He's down to 35%. He was in like the mid 40s for a bit, which I noted was unsustainable. Yeah, he went 0 for 3 in his return, but at least he hit 17 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 4 steals, and a block. And Will Guillory, friend of the show, someone who's watched as much Pelicans basketball as is possible over the last few years, said that's the best Herb has looked all season coming off the injury. So kind of similar to Marcus, I guess, coming off the injury. That was one of Marcus's best games, but I'm still on the side of trading for Herb. But Herb does have an injury history, and he does have shooting concerns. Morning Spring, thank you for the super chat. Any good East trades? Are you talking specifically like Lakers with the East, or just in general? Looking at the East, I had the mistake earlier with Justin Champagnie with Washington. I like him. I know he's someone that the chat has been on. I really like Corey Kispert. I don't think he's what the Lakers need, but I just had to express my admiration for Corey Kispert. On the Wizards, I mean, there's always the Cam Whitmore carrot just dangling there, but I don't know. Otherwise, I don't think anyone of note from Indiana, like maybe Mathurin or Shepherd, but Mathurin I don't think is quite the defender that the Lakers would want. Brooklyn has some interesting guys. Like, I think honestly most of the East guys are more bench level guys. Like even Champagnie, I think is more of a bench guy. So mean, then you get into Charlotte, and like, is Bridges a guy you try to get? Although again, for obvious reasons, that would be a very complicated move for LA in terms of the PR side of it. So yeah, I mean, Chicago, I do like Io DeSumo. That's a guy who could potentially be available there. But yeah, I think most of the East guys would probably be bench players. Jay No, what up, Jay? Says Cam should have been a Laker already. SMH. Yes, he should have been. He should have been. Schmidt K asks, Buha, do you think AR is better than Manu Ginobili? No, I do not. I know, like, you could look at, I don't know off the top of my head, but I would assume Manu's career high is only 19 and a half in terms of points per game. His career high in assists is 4.9. His career high in rebounds is 4.8. So what's wild, and numbers are slightly inflated due to pace and whatnot. Austin's averaging 28, 5.5, and 6.7. So Austin is besting Manu's career bests across the board, but he does have a couple. Well, look, he's got 4 championships, but he's got also a couple of playoff runs where he's averaged 20 plus, and for the playoffs 14, 4, and 4. But some of that was like, if you look at really from, I'd say 05 to 2014, that was like the bulk of his prime with the Spurs. 17, 4, and 4 off the bench, 37% on threes. So Manu was just he was a big game riser and clutch killer. And I think some of the questions we have, like, Manu was not really a guy who ever got disrupted or kind of affected by other people. Now, Austin has shown an incredibly high floor and ceiling in the regular season. And like, he's doing some things that clearly Manu has not done. Again, though, like different eras, different styles of play, different offenses and whatnot. But I think Manu is one of the most underrated players of all time, because I do think in some ways, like, people have made the AR Manu comparison before, but in some ways, potentially, like what could happen to, or what we thought might happen to Austin, but hasn't really, just because he ascended to like a level we just didn't see possible necessarily. Like, Manu really sacrificed for the team in a way that if you built a team around Manu Ginobili, he did have some health stuff and injury stuff that maybe he wouldn't have held up the best, but Manu could have been I truly think Manu could have been like a 25, 6-6 guy with his own team, and that team be pretty good. But he was drafted by the Spurs, and he bought into Spurs culture and was a big part of it. But like, there were times, I mean, how many big shots did he make in the playoffs? How many times did they run the offense through him instead of Tony or instead of Tim? Like, big game player with plenty of I think about the block he had on Harden, in whenever that was, I think 2017, 2017, I want to say. Was it 2017? I'm forgetting what year. I think it was 2017. Yeah. Dude's just and look, to be clear, I think Austin's a winner too, but there's no shade at Austin. I think, like, if Austin continues the trajectory he's on, I think that becomes a conversation longer term. He's got to have the playoff success and but Manu's was a first ballot Hall of Famer. Like, yeah. In defense of the genre, is AR better than Lamar Odom? Yeah. I think, like, this the context, right? So I would say this version of Austin is better than Lamar has ever played. But like, this 24 games of Austin. Now, does he maintain it for the full season? How does he fare in the playoffs? Those are two other questions that, like, if Austin tails off or if Austin struggles in the playoffs, then obviously I think that this is kind of an evolving thing in terms of like how we view it. But yeah, I mean, Lamar was never an all-star, though I think there was a couple years there where, he got consideration, but now you could say like who fits into who's maybe more malleable into different systems. And you can maybe say Lamar with his versatility, but I do think this version of Austin, I don't know if I would have said that even as recently as last season, but this version of Austin being an all-NBA contender, like Lamar was never an all-NBA contender, that there's a bit of a difference there. Puppy Chow asked, do you think OKC beats the record this year? I've been like holding out and thinking it. I now I'm succumbing to just the groupthink of they're probably going to do it. Like the crazy thing with them right now, they're 24-1. So to get to 74-8, they'd have to go 50-7 the rest of the season. And I don't think that's insane. Like they are killing everybody right now. And can they go 50-7? I mean, like, I guess if now that they've already gone 24-1, they need to go 50-7. If you just ask me, could OKC go 50-7? Yes, I think that's like, I mean, they could start the season 50-7, and then obviously they wouldn't break the record if that's the case. But like 50-7 is very in play, and I don't even think that's close to like the best case scenario. So, I mean, they've had injuries to Chet and J-Dub and Caruso, and it just doesn't matter who's in and out of the lineup. They blow everybody out. So, yeah, I mean, I guess like I still would hold out a little skepticism. I think they're going to win 70 games. I wonder if they get a little bored, if they want to rest guys at some point. But yeah, I mean, I'll say they go 74-8. Then I see Chaco Thunder says yes by 2 wins. BC says nope, 69-71 wins. So the crazy thing, if they get 69 wins, right? So that means 13 losses. That means they'd go. So I just said what, 50-7. So you're saying 45-12. I feel like 40. Like that's the crazy thing. 45-12 is like, it's obviously a good record, but that is I'll just do some quick math here. 45-12 is, that's a 65 win pace. Maybe. I mean, they won 68 games last year with Chet missing a bunch of time, Hartenstein missing time, Caruso missing time, and then they just spawned AJ Mitchell out of nowhere. Like maybe, but it like to your point here, I think 69 is probably the floor. I really don't see how they get under like 69, 70 wins. Ken Carter, did you do you're saying super chat? Was there a super chat from Ken Carter? Let me know if I missed a super chat. I thought I got them all. Unless Kane was saying his Kane Carter asks, hey, Jovan, how'd you compare the Kobe Powell Lakers era depth to today's team? That team was actually pretty deep for their era. If you go back, like, it's funny. People always like meme the 2009 Lakers and try to like crap on them like they weren't a good team or a great team. Like, I mean, that team won 65 games and won the title. I don't get it, but because that team, right? So you had Bynum, Powell, Ariza, Kobe, Fisher, then primary bench guys, Odom, Farmar, Vujicic, Shannon Brown, Luke Walton was on the fringes, and then that was like Josh Powell. Yeah, I mean, just the three-headed monster of Bynum, Powell, and Odom, I feel like kind of gets lost in history in terms of like how great of a big man trio that was. Like, it's not, Well, and more so for the depth, right? Because we've seen the Twin Towers looks, right? Like Duncan and Robinson and McHale and Parrish. And I don't really throw Bird in there as like one of the two, fours or fives, but we've seen great big man tandems, but a big trio, like it's basically a better version of what Minnesota has with Gobert and Randall and Reed. So I think that team had solid depth. Like I thought they went 8 to 9 players deep in most series and most matchups, which at the time, like I think we go through waves with the depth of the league in terms of how deep rotations are and whatnot. But now I would say that the average like player, like outside of the top 6, I do think like looking at Farmar or Vujicic or like I think some of those guys would have tougher times adjusting to like the modern game and not be as prominent of players as maybe they were in that era. But I think the top 6 for sure, like, they could play in basically any era and adapt and be really good. And then I think sometimes the Lakers had their depth tested a little bit, but for that era, I thought it was a pretty deep team. Our team, Mars TV, would you trade AR for Rod Artest? Depends which Artest are we talking about, but maybe. I mean, again, it depends which Artest we're talking about. But I would say peak Artest up to this point is better than peak. Like people forget how Artest was in the MVP. I think there's an alternate universe where he does not do the Malice at the Palace and like he finishes top 5 in MVP. Indiana wins 60 plus games and maybe wins the title that year. Schmidt K says, so if Manu and arguably Odom are better than AR and they're a 6-man on championship teams, I see where you're getting at here. Difference was, I've mentioned this before, Manu had guys like Bruce Bowen and Kawhi and Michael Finley, former All-Star, Danny Green, poster boy for 3&D. And also there was an element of staggering him and Tony, which I guess if you want to make that case for Austin and Luka, and then Lamar was coming off the bench for Powell and Bynum. So point being, there were guys of similar value and of similar production and guys that I'm sorry, call me an Austin stan, call me an Austin homer, call me an Austin defender, call me whatever you want to call me. Rui Hachimura and Austin Reeves are not close as basketball players. Marcus Smart, for as much as I champion him and his impact, is not close to the caliber of player that Austin is. Same with Gabe, same with Jake. So that's the issue here. If you want to construct a team, like, again, if you want to alternate universe it and say, put Herb Jones and Trey Murphy on the team and have Austin be the 6th man and argue that the basketball fit of Austin bringing up a punch off the bench, sure. But there's no Danny Green on this team. There's no Pau Gasol or I guess for Odom's case, it was more so Bynum. There's no Bynum or like, Bynum level competitor for Austin. That's the difference. The Lakers don't have the roster construction. And also the other part of this is you don't ask a dude who's averaging 28 points a game to come off the bench. Like that just does not happen. So I understand that people still have this idea of Austin as a bench guy or Austin as a 6-man guy. That's not on the current roster. And I also think with his production, like he's had some stinkers in some unfortunate losses for LA, but I don't think, I feel like I just feel like sometimes people are really selective with when they want to criticize or hit on Austin, when it's like when he drops 44 against Toronto, okay, well, then that's okay that he's the starter. That's okay that he's the guy. When he has 36 against Boston and did have the rough start to the game, but like when he's hitting the game winner in Minnesota, when he's having these like crazy games without Luka, I don't know. I just think I guess you could argue, hey, he's coming off the bench, and when Luka's out, he starts. Sure, but like this dude's been an All-NBA player. All-NBA players don't come off the bench. I think Austin has graduated out of that. And if you want to like complain about something or make a suggestion for a change, I think it starts with like the roster and the roster beyond those guys. And I do think Austin and Luka can work because Austin and Luka have worked. If you look at the lineup data, they are killing teams when those two are on the floor together. Now, when you add in LeBron, it's been negative, and that's been its own thing that they got to figure out. But Austin and Luka they worked last year, they've worked this year. It's been the other minutes that have been really rough. Chuck Dangler says, I'm going to wrap on this one because I think it's time to wrap. But this is predict the next 5, so let's go through it. So next 5: at Phoenix, at Utah, at LA, or at Clippers, at Phoenix versus Houston. I will say, I'll say 3-2. I think that they split the at Phoenixes and they lose to Houston and they beat Utah and the Clippers. Now, maybe if there's some grander, like part of this is me assuming they're not going to really change the starting group and the rotation. If they do and they make some real changes, I think 4-1 is in play. But I think if the Lakers continue with the status quo, which has kind of been the approach from the coaching staff in terms of keeping Rui as a starter, keeping certain bench rotations and certain guys in certain roles, I do think they're probably going to split the 2 Phoenix games and then probably lose to Houston on Christmas. But I mean, the Houston one's really close. I think that's like a pretty close to a 50-50 game. I think I don't see them winning twice in Phoenix. So I don't know if they're going to win this one and then lose the next one or lose this one, win the next one. But I think it's hard to win twice against a solid team on the road in like a week span. So I think they lose one of those. But I do think they beat Utah. They beat the Clippers. I mean, they got 4 straight road games here. They got a 4-game road trip at Phoenix, at Utah, at the Clippers, at Phoenix. So I think they will go 2-2 on that. 3-1 on that trip. And then I do think with how Houston is playing right now, I would favor them over LA. But with all that said, I appreciate you. I will be back tomorrow morning with Lakers Collective at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And then I will be going live later in the day for a new episode of Beyond the Block, first episode in a couple of weeks. And we will be doing contender rankings. So we'll be ranking the top 10 teams in the NBA in terms of their championship equity. So the way I'm thinking about it is like, okay, obviously OKC is going to be number 1. But if we wipe out OKC, who's the next team that, like, if OKC did not exist, who would I pick to be the champion? Okay, take that team out. Now, who's the next team that if OKC and that team don't exist, who's the team I would pick to be the champion? So on and so forth, all the way from 1 to 10. So I will note, I do have the Lakers pretty high still. So that's one kernel of positivity of I've not changed where I have LA, even coming off of last night's loss or tonight's loss, but is what it is. Appreciate you all. I will talk to you all very soon. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. Shout out to the chat. I do not have the Lakers at number 2. I just said, like, I have a clear top 3, but I do have the Lakers. Yeah, I have the Lakers at 4. All right. I have the Lakers at 4, but stay tuned for the full list tomorrow. But appreciate you all. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tomorrow. I will talk to you all then. Shout out to the Late Night Gang.